terms of how they've been playing, I think this is something that Newcastle really have um, to continue with, and try and progress on with the season. They're in a Champions League spot at the moment, so that tells you everything you need to know about how their season's going. And Eddie Howe, we have to credit Eddie Howe. He's done a lot of good work with Newcastle. Again, in terms of their cup run so far, they've done really well. They've done really well. Obviously, they're at the FA Cup, so when you look at both squads, both teams, obviously the second leg is next week, and Newcastle have, after tonight's game, they have a week off to be able to concentrate on the second leg, whereas Southampton do have that fixture in between, which sometimes when you look at that, I mean, they have, who've they got in the FA Cup? They've got, who have they got in the FA Cup? It don't even matter who they got in the FA Cup. They've got the FA Cup. They got Blackpool in the FA Cup. I found it. So yeah, they got Blackpool in the FA Cup. In between a really difficult period for any team really. But I think for me personally, I think Newcastle look the stronger team. I know what I've just said about Southampton going into that, but I do think that Newcastle have the stronger team. They've got the better manager to an extent as well. You look at the way that the two seasons have been going for both clubs. Like I said, I think Southampton have only won 4 out of 20 this season. They've lost 13. They've got 15 points. They're level with Everton on points. But, this could be the time for Newcastle to really cement themselves, not just in the Premier League, not just back in, the top division of English football, but with a trophy, and this is something that Newcastle have been striving for so many years. They've had some difficult times under Mike Ashley. Obviously now they've got new ownership in place. They've brought in a couple of good players and they've recruited really well. I looked the other day, apart from Isak, who I think was one of the bigger signings for them, and Gomeres as well, but they brought in like Dan Burn and certain players that Kieran Trippier, players that didn't really cost a lot, but they've been really effective for them as well. And I think that's detriment not just to the recruitment, but obviously Eddie Howe coming in and changing things and just changing everything about that club. Getting the fans back on board, I think, has been a massive help to them as well. But I do fancy Newcastle for this game. I know it's only half time after tonight's game. It's only the first leg and there's the second one to go. But I feel if Newcastle can even get a 1-0 at St Mary's tonight, or to get a 2-0, I think they go to St James's Park, and I think it's going to be difficult for Southampton to bring it back. But I want to quickly go into predicted lineups, which I think we have here. So I'm going to start with Newcastle first, which is the first one I'm going to go with. So I've gone with a usual squad that I think Eddie Howe would probably try and use tonight. I think he'll stick with Pope in goal. I think he's been really good for Newcastle. I think he's, again, another player that has been brought in and done a really good job for them. One of the reasons why they are where they are in the league as well, but also in the cup run that they've had. I think he's been a really good addition in terms of the squad and what he can bring to the squad as well. Kieran Trippier, who I've mentioned before, I think is another good player. I think he's someone that he's worked his way back into the league and into form. He kind of fell out of form at Tottenham before he's moved to Atletico, and he's come back to the English game and he's just taken it by storm. He's taken it by storm again. A very reliable player as well, someone that always puts in a good shift for Newcastle. And I think they'll rely on him more so the next 2 games. In the 2 legs of this cup, they're going to rely on him heavily as well. Pairing him in the centre back, I've gone with Fabian Schär and Botman as the 2 centre backs. I think, again, Eddie Howe's got the best out of them. They've got a really good partnership as centre back as partnerships go. And I think they'll be up and running for this game. I think they have to be as well, because you look at Southampton, Ward-Prowse and Doozy, Depreno, Mara up front as well. Lavia, Diallo. Southampton have got some key players which we're going to get onto slightly, in a minute. But they've got some key players, and even from set pieces as well. They have to be careful. Salasu is another one, as I mentioned. Lavia, Lenako as well. They're all good players on set pieces, and we know what James Ward-Prowse can do from a set piece for Southampton as well. So I do think the back line is going to have to be so tight and so switched on throughout this game in order for Newcastle to progress, and I think they can do that. I think they have to stop any danger from both flanks for Southampton, so I think they have to do that. But I think they've got this in the bag, man. I feel like Newcastle are the team that, in all honesty, I've backed them to win the cup. You know, I think I've backed them to win the cup. I think, as again, tomorrow we'll do not Forest and United, but I think they'll do them in the cup. I really do. I think Newcastle can go all the way. You know, under Eddie Howe, I think they've got every opportunity to do that. So Dan Burn at left back again, done really well for Newcastle. So I think, you know, that left side is going to be so crucial. I feel it's more so because of, you know, you look at the right side of Southampton, and I just think, you know, there's going to be opportunity for, you know, if as we see on the screen here, you know, Joe Willock and Saint Maximum actually start the game. I think they'll have a field day down that left side with Dan Burn as well, who, you know, is always switched on. Is a resilient defender, really good, really good at what he can do. And I think, you know, if we can see that back line play and stick together and work as a group rather than, you know, sometimes, I mean, we got to see it at the weekend in the Arsenal United game. You know, sometimes players switch off in defense. You saw I remember Basako do that a couple of times and, you know, played certain players on. But I think if they can keep the back line as solid as it needs to be, you know, with the aid of the midfield, I think they've got every chance to progress in this cup for me. My midfield, I've gone for Longstaff, Joe Linton, and Joe Willock, as I've just mentioned. Again, I think that's a unchanged lineup from Eddie Howe. I think he's stuck with that relatively most of this season, and I think he has to do that. I think this is an opportunity for me that he can potentially rest Bruno Gomes as well. So, you know, there is still a lot of football. And I think with Eddie Howe, with Newcastle, they will still have one eye on just maybe European, you know, Champions League football. You know, there's no guarantee that they're going to win this Carabao Cup. So I think they do still have to have one eye focused on the league. And I think this is a good opportunity, albeit they've got no FA Cup this weekend. I think this is a good opportunity to rest, you know, Gomes and just leave him out of the team. You know, he's been overly used a lot, but I think that midfield is brilliant. You know, I think that it's a really solid one. I think it matches up easily with the likes of Southampton, who I think will probably play a 4-2-3-1 formation today or tonight. So I think it might give them the edge in midfield in terms of maybe overpowering the midfield of Southampton and being able to get that ball forward to the attackers who have gone for St. Maximum, who I've just mentioned, Isak and Almiron as well. I think this is a game that I would potentially leave Callum Wilson out of, not because of the fact that he's constantly in and out of the team due to injuries, but I think he hasn't also hit the best form since maybe before the World Cup started. And I think, you know, he probably does need that rest out of the team, if we're being honest. And I think, you know, it's been lucky for Newcastle because Almiron's been sensation this season for them, as well as you know, some of the other players. You know, Isak scored a brilliant goal as well at the weekend. So I think that for me, this is the team that I would go with if I was from you know, supporting Newcastle and I wanted to see them win. I think it's a very strong lineup. I think it gives you the balance that you need within, you know, all departments of the team. And I think, you know, as I said, I think that midfield, the battle between both teams in midfield is going to be so crucial tonight. I think, you know, Joe Linton and Willock and Longstaff will have their work cut out with, as I said, you know, the way that Southampton can play at times with the two fullbacks bombing down that wing. You know, Japeno and Adoizi as well. As I said, you know, they're very good wingers. And I think James Ward-Prowse, we know he can pick out a pass, he can push things in that midfield as well. So I think the battle will be, I think, in midfield for me. But I just think Newcastle will edge that as well. So that's my lineup for Newcastle that I've gone with. That's the team that I think I would go with, and potentially Eddie Howe might start with. And there, we have to factor in, I think there is some injuries as well to both teams. So, you know, I think Newcastle will be out without the likes of John Joe Shelvey, Matt Targett, and Emil Kraft as well. So there's three there that I think they're definitely going to be out of contention for today. They've been out for a while or so. So I think this is the team that for me has to start tonight and has to give Newcastle every opportunity. As I said, you know, going into that second leg next week with the cushion to go in, and maybe, you know, at that point you can bring in, you know, the likes of Callum Wilson again or Gomes and play them as well. But this team for me is comfortable, confident enough that should be able to get a result at St Mary's as well. Let's flip over. Let's go to Southampton's team, which is the next team I'm going to put on the screen. And in my opinion, this is the best I can go with. Now, let's start with the injuries before we talk about who's playing. So we know that Bella Capchop is out of the team. Theo Walcott, Livramento, Stuart Armstrong are the main key points that potentially will not be featured in tonight's game for them. So I have gone with, again, a very sort of predicted line that I think you can kind of say they don't really have a choice but to play these players. Benuzu in goal, um, Kalita Carr, Salasu as my centre backs, Carl Walker Peters at left back, Lanako, as I said, at right back, Diallo and Lavia is my two sort of holding double pivot, as people like to call it in this day and age, as the two in the middle of the pitch. I've gone for Japeno, Adoizi as my wide midfield attacking players, with James Ward-Prowse down the middle, and Mara front line, the number 9 role as the striker. Now, I just mentioned about Newcastle's midfield, and I look at Lavia, who I'm a very big fan of, Diallo, who I'm a very big fan of, and think they're both having really tremendous seasons, but they have to be switched on tonight. They have to be switched on tonight because this is going to be a massive game for them. As I said at the start of this could be a make or break for Nathan Jones and also the Southampton squad. I mean, I think it might have been Ipswich who won a European Cup. I think it was the old UEFA Cup, and still got relegated one season. I'm pretty sure it was Ipswich. I might be wrong there, but this could be the same scenario. I think you look at the team that they have, and on paper, you just fancy Newcastle. I mean, going forward, you look at Newcastle's front line, as I mentioned, if they do start with Isak and St. Maximum, I think they'll cause some problems. Too many problems for Southampton. And, we've seen how Southampton are very leaky at the back with goals. I think they've conceded 35 in the league. They've only scored 17 this season. Whereas you look at Newcastle, who scored 13, but only conceded 11. So I just look at this team and I think, I don't know if it's going to be strong enough. I think Che Adams is another one that will be out for them as well. So I think they'll be out with him. So you have to look at the two squads on form. As I mentioned, they played really well against Man City, but you look at the form of Southampton, you look at how they've been playing, and it's not good. I mean, it's not good for them at all. I think they won, obviously, against Everton earlier on this year, but I think they lost 1-0 to Southampton at the weekend, to Villa, sorry, at the weekend. They've gone on sort of a run. I think they've won their last 3 games, I think, bar the Aston Villa game, but they've won Palace, I think, in the FA Cup. They obviously beat Manchester City, and then they beat Everton, so they went on a little bit of a run. But if you look before that, I mean, it's been very inconsistent in the league for them. They've had a really good cup run, but you could arguably say, playing Lincoln City, in the Carabao Cup, is it really a challenge for them? Probably not. So I think, you look at the two teams who's had the harder run to get to where they are in the semi-finals, you probably say Newcastle. And I do think Newcastle, for me, just edge it. They just edge it over Southampton as well. So it'll be an interesting game. I think, if Southampton can nick a 1-0 and try and take some to St. James's, then credit to them, but I just don't see it. I think there has to be a conversation as well around a set piece specialist in terms of Kieran Trippier and James Ward-Prowse. Both of them are good on free kicks, and you kind of need to think, it's not one of those games you want to be giving away free kicks on the edge of the box, because they only need one chance to get that ball in the back of the net. And as I said, they're both really good on free kicks. Both goalkeepers are of a standard where they should be able to cope with them, but they are really good on free kicks. So I think this is one of those where you don't want to be giving away stupid, silly free kicks on the edge of your box and allowing an opportunity for Ward-Prowse or for Trippier to try and score a goal. Does it spell the end of Nathan Jones if they come out of this? Possibly. I mean, we've seen managers come out of better situations and still get sacked. The worst case scenario is they get sacked, even if they Roberto Di Matteo won the Champions League and got sacked. So I think Nathan Jones is under a lot of pressure, a massive amount of pressure, and I think those last couple of games where they've won games has potentially lifted some of that pressure, but I still think they have a lot to do, a massive lot to do. A massive ask for them now to try and even salvage something from this season. And I think if they can do it, then great. But I still think looking at the league form and the games that they still have to play in the league, yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough for them. They have a tough game against Blackpool, I think, at home as well. But even so, I mean, you're looking at this team. They've got Brentford to play, they've got Wolves to play, Chelsea, Leeds, Leicester, United, Tottenham, West Ham, Southampton. All massive games coming up from now until from February till April. So that's a massive chunk of games that they're playing. And also, if they do get through, then they have to factor in that they've got a final to look forward to at the end. Does that then take some momentum off the players trying to stay in the league? Do they focus on the final? I think this is a setup for Newcastle. I mean, we'll do the preview tomorrow for Nottingham Forest and Man United. But if I'm being 100% honest, I think Newcastle, for me, are favourites for this trophy. I think they have everything going for them. They've got a brilliant manager in Eddie Howe. The owners are willing to back the manager. The fans are on board. The players are playing brilliant football, and you just can't see past them. You really can't. And I think it's worked in their favour that the second leg is at St James's Park as well. I think the crowd will get on top of them, on top of Southampton in that second leg, regardless of tonight's scoreline, and be the 12th man. So I think it's going to be a really difficult game for Southampton. I hope I'm wrong 100%, but I can't see past Newcastle. So I'm going to give my prediction before I round this live up. I'm going to go for Newcastle 2, Southampton nil. I think the firepower in front for Newcastle is too much for Southampton to deal with. And I think, even, if they put six at the back, I still think Newcastle will find a way to break through and to break down that defense quite easily, if I'm honest. So, as I say, Southampton fans are apologising in advance. I think you'll get knocked out of this cup. But Newcastle, I think, will progress and go all the way to the end and potentially go on to win the Carabao Cup. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. What you think about tonight's game. Do you think Southampton have the edge because they're at home first? Will Newcastle come in and rest a couple of players? Will Eddie Howe actually go strong and put out his best lineup that he's got? Winning a trophy and getting top four is completely something that Newcastle potentially weren't even expecting to get. Is he ahead of the objectives, ahead of the plan at Newcastle? Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to give this video a like as well. And if you haven't done so already, you can see the social account, the Twitter account is in the link as well. So make sure you go and follow us on there. This has been Theo's Style of Play Football. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back tomorrow with the Nottingham Forest Man United preview of the Carabao Cup. And hopefully my prediction is right. So stay tuned for some more content and we'll be back tomorrow with more.